Alright, Peacemakers, are you ready? Because Season 2 has finally arrived. Today, we are diving deep, pun intended, into Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 1, titled The Ties That Grind. And trust me, those ties are grinding hard in this mirror episode. After 3 years, the 11th Street Kids are finally back, and today we're breaking it all down. Full spoilers ahead. We kick things off with the previously in the DCU, with some things that we've seen before that are now officially canon in the DCU, but there are also some major new changes made to fit into this season and beyond. Jumping right into us revisiting the events from the finale, starting with Adebayo calling her mother Amanda Waller for backup, but instead of her saying she should get the Justice League involved, we hear her saying that they should get the Justice Gang involved. We also hear Peacemaker making a reference to him interacting with Green Lantern instead of Green Arrow. From here, instead of us seeing the silhouettes of some of the members of the DCEU Justice League and the actual cameos from characters like Aquaman and The Flash, we see the Justice Gang, which include our new Superman, Mr. Terrific. We got Green Lantern Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and get this, we also have Supergirl, which to me is fascinating considering where we last saw her at the end of Superman last month, and it didn't appear that she was much of a team player. So it will be interesting if we find out in the future that she's teamed up with not only Superman in the past, but clearly also the Justice Gang as well, which is what this new scene basically confirms. Now, just to nerd out for a second, I am curious to why we didn't see some of those characters here. I understand why we didn't see the DCEU Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman in the finale of Peacemaker Season 1, but why not show the new Superman, Supergirl, and Mr. Fantastic in this moment? Now, I would assume that they were maybe too busy shooting Superman because Superman and Peacemaker were shooting around the same time, or maybe the actors David Cornsweet, Millie Alcock, and Eddie Cathetti were working on another project, so maybe there was a scheduling issue, but I just thought that it was interesting not to show all of them considering that this is not a complicated or messy situation like it was back with the DCEU. But as I digress, I do expect to potentially see a lot of cameos in this season of Peacemaker. We might see a Superman. We might even see a Supergirl at some point. Now, before moving on, I thought it would be nice to clarify the timeline that we're working with this season. During an interview with EW, James Gunn addressed how much time has passed in season 2 since the first season of Peacemaker. He only mentioned it as a couple years, intentionally keeping it vague. He also shared that I see how difficult after my time at Marvel it is to make things truly fit together, so it's an unspecified amount of couple of years. It's also important to note that James Gunn explained at the most recent Comic-Con this past year, the show happens about a month after the events of Superman. As he also says, Peacemaker is definitely part of the DCU now. Now, with that out of the way, let's actually talk about the episode. We see our boy Chris, who has now moved into his dad's house, which already feels like a bad omen. We didn't see him being haunted by his father in this episode like we saw in the finale of last season, but Chris will see him in a much different light later in this episode. As it is now nighttime, we see Eagly being Eagly, wanting to fly outside in the snow, but it's way too cold for that. So we watch as Chris does what any good Eagle dad would do, which is he allows Eagly to spread his wings in the quantum unfolding storage area. Now inside, Chris encounters a mysterious alien who gives him the cold shoulder. Now, based on the most recent Red Band trailer that dropped last week, we'll be seeing this alien again, and knowing James Gunn's sensibilities, I bet this alien will probably have a big moment at some point in this season. Now here's where letting your eagle fly loosely around gets Chris into some interdimensional trouble. We see Eagly senses something familiar as he begins hitting his beak against an interdimensional door, complete with the helmets outside that look identical to Peacemaker's. Curious to know what's on the other side, Chris types in what looks to be his own code and walks right in. Now inside, he finds newspapers praising the work of the top trio, as we'll later find out include himself, his father, and his brother. Now before Chris can even process what's going on, a concerned Agee asks if he's okay, if he's sleepwalking again, and here's the kicker or the ironic moment. Agee says to him it's like he's seen a ghost. Now Chris, understandably so, panics and he bails. It's going to be very interesting to see how Chris will handle this new situation he finds himself in, with knowing that there's a world where he and his family are happy and on the same page as a unit. Now, to briefly discuss this moment that we've all been waiting for years now, and that's getting a new look at the new opening title sequence. Now, my main takeaways from this new opening sequence is, number one, we got a brand new song, which is going to have to grow on me. I missed the old song. I hope that it comes back at some point this season. Now, as far as the dance moves here, they are pretty similar to season 1's dance moves, but there seems to be a little bit more arm movement and also a lot of hip thrusting going on here. And as we see, there's a mix of the old cast and the new cast members, a much larger group than season 1 here. But I gotta say, it's still awkwardly hilarious and just so funny to see these actors dancing their ass off. But there's also a definite emphasis on the romance between Peacemaker and Hardcore. More on that a little bit later. Now we see Adebayo picking up Peacemaker as we're brought up to speed to what's been going on. Now their friendship looks to be in a good place, but she's having trouble back home with her wife because of her job. Now I'll be honest with you all, I'm a big fan of Adebayo, but her relationship with her wife to me was really underdeveloped, and I really didn't think it added much to her arc last season. Now I would be okay if we don't really address her home life this time around, because again, I just didn't find it to be all that interesting, but I'm sure they'll check in with each other every now and then throughout this new season. Now we also see that she started her new business, Adebayo Security Consulting. Reliable, stylish, and deadly. Love that tagline, by the way, but it'll be interesting to see if this new business will be successful and important to her story this season. I also wonder if we'll see her interacting with her mom, Amanda Waller. I would love to see her pop up in the season because honestly, they only had like 1 or 2 seasons, season 1, but I am curious to know, knowing about Waller, if she is in this season, will whatever the events shake out to be in Peacemaker, will it roll over to her announced Waller series that's been delayed for a couple years now? Chris, meanwhile, hasn't been getting along with some of the metahumans who have been making fun of him, but Adebayo reminds him that he is a real superhero who saved the day, and any superhero team would be lucky to have him. Which, speaking of, we see that he's headed into an audition for a spot in the Justice Gang, and is very much put together like an American Idol type of situation. We see Chris listing off some of his skills in front of Guy Gardner, Hawk Girl, and Maxwell Lord, who really aren't impressed. Now, this scene was already shown in the initial trailer a couple months ago, but we see that they are taking digs at him, laughing at him, talking about his oral skills, all while the mic is clearly on. As we see, Peacemaker, attempting to show growth, tells them that he's a changed man and that killing doesn't come as easy to him as it used to, but they could care less. As we see Peacemaker calling them out, and he eventually walks out, and honestly, good for Chris. Now, I don't think by the end of the season we're going to see Peacemaker joining a team or in particularly join the Justice Gang, but I do think that he will gain their attention, but more importantly, he's going to probably gain their respect at some point. Now let's check in with everyone's favorite emotionless secret agent, Harcourt. As she learns that she suffers from toxic masculinity, something that she does not take well as she's interviewing for a new position within the agency, but her evaluation is a disaster. We hear that Amanda Waller is still awaiting her verdict, but she still has enough pull to blackball Harcourt from any agency in America. Without a job, Harcourt is lost. Her having no job or a mission to serve, you can clearly see this is making her feel pointless, which to me seems to be what she's going to be dealing with internally this season. Now, Peacemaker after his terrible interview and Harcourt after her terrible interview, we see them linking up as he pays her a visit. And their relationship is very complicated to say the least. After everything they went through in season 1 and with him waiting by her bedside, there's an unspoken feeling between the two. As we learn that something did happen between them romantically on a party boat. Now for Peacemaker, it meant something, but for Harcourt, it was a mistake. Now, if I were to bet, I'm betting that we will eventually see that boat party scene between the two, and I also bet there is a 100% chance that Harcourt shares similar romantic interests in Peacemaker, but there's clearly something inside of her that prevents her from getting into a relationship. Now, after that tense moment with Harcourt, what does a heartbroken hero do? Well, we see him diving head first into his drug stash and throws an all-new party that turns into one massive orgy. Look, season 1 was raunchy, but this scene right here, this is the most graphic of the series so far, a major tonal shift after we saw Superman last month. Seriously though, this sex party makes the boys' hero-orgasm episode look like a church picnic. We're talking full-on porno levels. We got dudes jerking off, we got balls and boobs everywhere. There was a lot going on in this scene. Now while this was all going down, pun intended, John Economos is keeping tabs on Peacemaker outside. Now, my favorite character of this entire show makes his appearance this season, and that is Adrian, aka the Vigilante, as we see him calling John, asking him to test his knowledge about owls. Which, knowing Adrian, I bet he wants to train an owl so he can kind of compete with Peacemaker with Agee. Now, Adrian's been having these random daily conversations with John, which is hilarious, and it's even funnier to think that after saving the world, Adrian's still working at the same restaurant from season 1, but hey, at least he's got a job, unlike the rest of the crew besides John. Now it's time to meet some of our new players this season as we meet him for the third time in the DCU in less than a year, and that is Rick Flag Sr. Man, Rick Flag Sr. has had a hell of a run recently as he barely made it out alive with Creature Commandos, and we saw him becoming the new head of Argus and Superman, and now here he is again. As we see him watching the same talk show we saw in Superman called The Sphere, as they're discussing the lack of the defense against metahumans who have been escaping Belle Reve in Arkham in the last few months. As it's clear as day that he has a lot on his plate right now. Now, someone like me who not only watched and enjoyed and covered Creature Commando Season 1, I do wonder if this show will make any reference to the events of what Flag went through in Creature Commandos, and I also wonder if they're going to show how he went from being unconscious in a hospital bed after losing brutally to a fight with Clayface, and how he became the head of Argus. I also wonder if any of the Creature Commando members will make their live-action debut in Peacemaker Season 2. Maybe we'll see David Harbour as Eric Frankenstein, since him and Rick Flag were pretty close. Now, we also are introduced for the very first time in the DCU, Sasha Bordeaux, who informs him on the glitch in Peacemaker's house, one that's similar to Lex Luthor, who was toying with the quantum rifts in Superman. Now, speaking of the glitch and the quantum rift, I do wonder if it'll ever be revealed how Agee even managed to get access to the quantum folding storage, and if maybe it'll be revealed if him and Lex Luthor were somehow working together at some point in the past. Now, backtracking a bit and discussing Sasha Bordeaux. Now, Sasha was first introduced in the comics back in 2000, where she was a Secret Service agent who turned into a private contractor hired by Bruce Wayne's personal security, which was Lucius Fox, even though Wayne didn't want her to be a part of the security. Now, Sasha became very suspicious of Bruce Wayne's late night disappearances as she did some searching, and she was shocked to find that Bruce Wayne was secretly Batman. Now, long story short, her and Bruce Wayne had a little bit of a romantic thing going on, but they eventually broke things off when she found out that he was a playboy. Now, besides having ties with Batman and Argus, she's also connected to a group by the name of Checkmate. Checkmate is a division of the Task Force X, and there are different variations of the team, and sometimes characters like Peacemaker and Vigilante, even Waller, are a part of it. Now, it's safe to assume that Sasha's going to play a big role, as well as Rick Flag this season, but sticking with Sasha, I'm excited to learn more about her and to see her future in DCU and to see her come across the Batman at some point. Now, back at the freak-off party, and we see Peacemaker is now fully intoxicated. We see him stumbling back into the quantum unfolding storage area as he re-enters the alternate dimension. Now, Chris notices more of the newspapers on the wall celebrating the victories of Top Trio. As he makes his way outside, a truck pulls up, and who walks out? Keith. That's right, his older brother, the one he accidentally killed in his own dimension, who here is alive and well. And not only that, their father comes outside and Peacemaker witnesses a level of care and compassion from his father that Chris never thought was possible. As we see this new trio sharing some old stories about how Chris used to fight this imp that came out of the dimensional portal, as we watch Chris is in absolute shock about this moment right now. Meanwhile, Harcourt, still reeling and frustrated, hits a bar. We see that she gets this unwarranted attention from one of the biker members. As she is already fueled by anger, we see she explodes and has a bar fight, as she manages to take out at least 5 or 6 of the dudes before eventually losing and getting kicked out of the bar. But the look right here of her bloody face tells a completely different story. She wanted that fight. She needed to feel something, to feel pain, to feel alive. There's a deep sadness and anger in her that I'm definitely excited to explore more this season. Now back with Peacemaker, as everyone says their goodnights, this was a really nice moment for Chris as he says to his brother Keith that he loves him, and for the first time since they were kids, in his dimension, Keith says it back. As Chris breaks into tears, it's truly a powerful and heartbreaking moment and really kind of pulls the heartstrings and lets you know the emotional stakes that's going on this season. Now back in their regular dimension, we see John shows Adebayo Peacemaker's interdimensional tunnel, as he tells her that once Peacemaker killed Rick Flag Jr., Rick Flag Sr. had Chris on 24-hour watch. Now, John doesn't want to lose his job at the agency, so he tasks Adebayo with talking to Peacemaker about the glitch. Now, as we come to a close of this episode, we see our Peacemaker still roaming around his other self's house, as he finds a picture of him and Harcourt together as a couple. Now, if you notice in this photo, I have a feeling that this dimension's Peacemaker is maybe more of a douchebag than our Peacemaker, and maybe he isn't liked as much from the others, and it's also safe to assume that they'll eventually find out that this Chris isn't their Chris. As this dimension's Peacemaker, let's call Peacemaker number 2, walks in and puts a gun up to Chris's head. Now, our Peacemaker tries to make a run for it as he's trying to get back into his own dimension. They both chase into the quantum unfolding storage area and go at it for a little bit, exchanging blows. As Peacemaker number 2 has the upper hand and is about to deliver the killing blow to our Peacemaker, but out of luck, we see that he gets blasted into some metal object that stabs him in the back and kills him, as our Peacemaker is the last man standing. As it appears that Chris is going to have a choice to make. He's going to look to be living a double life, well, until he gets caught, and will most likely have to choose between his dimension or the other, and my guess is that the other dimension will again eventually find out that that isn't their Peacemaker. What's up, Peacemakers, and welcome back to my channel for another deep dive into the wonderfully chaotic world of Peacemaker, where some think ducks and eagles look alike. If you just finished Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 2, titled "A Man is Only as Good as His Bird," and you want to discuss everything, well, you come to the right place. We're unpacking it all in today's breakdown, so toss yourself a beer and get your Pokemon ready, and let's break down this episode, full spoilers ahead. We kicked things off 8 months ago with a familiar face in a new leadership role in as Rick Flag Sr., the new director of Argus, as John Economos, ever the smooth operator, tries to make nice, hinting at old pal status, probably from their Creature Commando days. But Rick Flag Sr. isn't buying it as he cuts straight to the chase. He wants the full, unredacted report on his son, Rick Flag Jr.'s death, remembering that Amanda Waller had kept that classified. Now, this to me sets the stage perfectly for what I would imagine is going to be a very important plot point for this season, and that being Rick Flag Sr.'s main objective in taking down Peacemaker. As Economos, visibly uncomfortable, tries to shield Peacemaker, blaming Waller's orders to the possible cause to what happened to his son. But the file speaks for itself in Flag's eyes as we flash back to the scene where Peacemaker killed Rick Flag Jr. in the Suicide Squad. For me, this scene was quick yet effective in establishing for those who might have not seen the Suicide Squad or might not have seen the Creature Commando show of what happened to Rick Flag Jr., and it did a great job of showing Rick Flag Sr.'s single-minded, burning desire for revenge. Now, early on in this season, I think the big question is, can the show make us, the audience, turn on Peacemaker, our hero from Season 1, and rally behind Rick Flag Sr. in his quest for vengeance? It's a bold move, and I'm here for it, but I am curious to know if there will be a point in the season where we will be siding with Rick Flag Sr. Now, cutting back to present, Peacemaker is in full-blown existential crisis after killing his alternate self. We watch as he tries to hide the body, losing his cool, and doing what any smart person would do in a situation, and that's call Adrian, aka Vigilante, asking for his bone saws. We watch as Chris takes a shower, trying to wash off the blood from his body, which to me speaks a lot to what's going on with him mentally. He's literally trying to wash away the act of unaliving himself, even if it is another version of himself from another dimension. Think about it. He's been directly responsible for the deaths of Rick Flag Jr., his brother Keith, his father Agee, and now his alternate self. In his mind, he's a one-man death magnet and is clearly taking a toll on his mental state. Honestly, right now, my boy Chris needs therapy, not a dimension-hopping chamber. Meanwhile, Adebayo pays a visit to her current/ex-wife's apartment. Now, Key isn't thrilled about this unannounced visit, revealing a relationship misunderstanding, which is that she thought that they broke up, while Adebayo thought that they were just on a break. Look, I said this in my season 1 breakdown at points, and I said it last week that Adebayo's relationship does nothing for me. I honestly don't even really understand why her semi-ex is even mad at her. In a world where Superman and metahumans exist and you have a partner who's trying to do their best to keep the balance between good and evil, why wouldn't she be happy or proud of Adebayo's position? I don't know, maybe I'm biased because I'm an Adebayo fan and I'm taking her side, but I really don't know where her ex or her current wife is really coming from her point of view. Besides just being, quite frankly, annoying. She knew who she was and who her mother was. Why would she be mad at her situation? And again, Adebayo literally saved the world from falling apart from the butterflies. So again, I'm not a fan of this particular plot line. I don't really know where it's going. Again, I am biased because I like Adebayo, but let me know if you all take the wife side, if you see where she's coming from. Let's talk about it in the comments below. Now, to backtrack a bit, it is in this conversation that I'm reminded that their home together is actually in Gotham. Which, speaking of, the more I think about it, it's kind of wild that Amanda Waller would be okay with her only child living in Gotham, which is arguably the worst place to live in the DC universe. Which actually makes me wonder if Adebayo had any personal run-ins with the Bat family, including Batman himself. Now, if you were like me, the Gotham connections have been piling up so far in the DC universe. If we go back to Creature Commandos, we actually went to Gotham at one point in the season. We saw the sign leading to Gotham City in Superman, and now we have 3 references in back-to-back episodes in Peacemaker. So again, I think it's just a matter of time before we go to Gotham, maybe in live action, and who's to say that we might not see a man dressed like a bat. But going back to the scene between the two, based on how Key was talking and she wouldn't say that she loved Adebayo back, them getting back together isn't looking like a possibility anytime soon. And again, I'm okay with that because I believe Adebayo deserves better. Now, catching up with Harcourt, we see her patching herself up at a pharmacy after her bar fight in last week's episode. We see a kind lady seeing her bruises and tries to offer help, suspecting an abusive relationship. And honestly, she's not entirely wrong. Harcourt's self-destructive tendencies and inability to process emotions by, say, not getting to bar fights is an abusive relationship with herself. Now, Harcourt being Harcourt, she snaps at the woman by yelling at her, saying that she's not a mirror of the woman's past. This right here is another prime example of her pushing away anyone who tries to get close to her or offer any support. Now, you'll notice before leaving the pharmacy, Harcourt sees a help wanted sign in the door, and with no luck getting a job at any agencies right now, I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up taking this opportunity to get a job and get some money in her pocket. Now, still on watch outside of Chris's house, Economos is introduced to a new character this season by the name of Langston Fleury, an Argus agent who was sent by Bordeaux. Remembering last week that Flag makes sure that Peacemaker watch was top priority and he wanted someone to keep tabs on Economos because of his relationship with Chris. Now, Langston is played by a legend, and that's Tim Meadows. I'm such a big fan of his work, and I love his dry sense of comedy at points because it is just such a perfect fit with James Gunn's style, as he immediately brings a new and fun dynamic, and honestly, he delivered some of my favorite moments of this entire episode. As we watch Fleury, who, by the way, has a bird blindness, and Economos, aka Ginger Cool as he calls him, have a bit of a back and forth, which again I found to be hilarious as they're trying to figure each other out and discuss the differences between ducks and eagles. Now, Adebayo doing Economos a favor from last week, she's checking in on Chris on the quantum unfolding chamber, which we learned for the first time in the show and in the DCU has access to 99 different universes and dimensions. Now, Adebayo being the good friend that she is, she senses Chris's tensions and fills him in on being monitored by Rick Flag Sr. and lets him know that he's in charge of Argus now, and Flag knows that he killed his son. Adebayo advises him not to use the chamber again and to willingly give it up to Argus, or else Argus will use it against him to send him back to prison. Now, my boy Adrian finally arrives, and hilariously, he's upset about missing out on the orgy last week at Chris's place. Now, despite Adebayo's warning, Chris takes Adrian into the chamber, which immediately triggers Argus's alerts. Now, Bordeaux orders Fleury to sweep Chris's house while they're celebrating John's return to Evergreen later that night, but she wants this information to not be shared with John. Now, back inside, Chris fills Adrian in on the whole doppelganger dilemma. As we get this very Quentin Tarantino Peacemaker-esque scene put together here, as Chris and Adrian are dismembering and burning the other Chris's body and using Adrian's tools to do so. Now, it could be wrong, but we all know that Adrian is a psychopath, and he was a little bit too happy when they were dismembering the other Chris's Chris's body, and I think he was having a good time, number one because he's a psycho, but also he's still upset about Chris not inviting him to that orgy. Now we see that our Chris takes the alternate version's Chris cell phone, and later he spies on the phone and he finds a photo album of him and the alternate version of Harcourt looking like a perfectly happy couple, which sparks a dangerous thought for Chris, and that is, could he find this level of happiness in this other dimension? Meanwhile, we see the 11th Street kids are finally reunited on Harcourt's rooftop. It's a fun and happy moment for the characters being back together as Chris declares nothing will keep them apart, which to me is a bit of foreshadowing because we as the audience know that each one of these characters are secretly hiding something from the other, which in my mind in return could actually break them apart. Now I do want to touch on the conversation that we see between John and Adebayo and him being stressed out about his job. I hope at some point this season we learn more about why it is important for him to continue to work for Argus and what it means for him and why he can't quit his job. Now Adebayo mentions that John should start his own business like she did, which makes me think I wouldn't be surprised if he is going to end up joining her business by the end of the season, and maybe she'll have her own agency with the entire 11th Street kids. Now speaking of quitting, we see the other conversation on the rooftop between Chris and Harcourt as he's trying to ask her about her bruises in the bar fights, but we see that she denies him and being defensive about him suggesting that he sees a little bit of himself in her, as she refuses to believe that she's as miserable as the guy who fights crime in a costume. Now, this conversation not going as according to plan for Chris is just another example of him pushing himself closer to exploring this other reality where him and Harcourt are actually lovers. Now, back at Chris's house, Flurry's team enters and finds a quantum chamber door. But they made one fatal mistake, and that's messing with Agee. Our favorite bald eagle attacks, taking down the team with ease, even taking out one of the agent's eyes, as Aglee's feeling himself and eventually retreats, leaving a bloody mess, but also making enemies with Argus agents. Now, sticking with Agee, and after that attack, I am to assume that this is where frequent collaborator of James Gunn, Michael Rooker, comes into play, as he's going to be playing Red Street Wild. It's been said throughout the promotions leading up to the show that he is the world's foremost eagle hunter who is on a mission to kill Agee. You'll also notice in the opening title sequence of the show that he's grouped with Team Argus, which again leads me to believe that they're going to hire him to kill Agee. Now, as we come to an end of this episode, we yet again find Chris, who is drunk and yet again making a terrible decision. Now, after that uncomfortable conversation with Harcourt, he messages the other dimension's Harcourt from Chris's phone by simply saying hi. But of course, the message doesn't go through because, well, they're in another dimension. Now remember, we learned in last week's episode that the alternate version of Chris had broke up with her, so they're probably not on talking terms right now. And yet again, against Adebayo's advice, we see Chris enters the quantum chamber yet again. As he re-enters the other dimension, he hears his alternate father and alternate brother looking for Chris, who they are assuming has gone missing. Now, something to keep an eye on moving forward is one of them mentioning that the alternate Chris may have been taking his pills again. Was he a drug addict? Did he have a pill popping addiction? Only time will tell. As this episode closes with the alternate version of Harcourt messaging Chris back by simply saying hi, but with a broken heart emoji, as this looks like the perfect segue for our Chris to maybe fix that broken heart. What's going on to all you peacemakers out there, and welcome back to my channel. Strap in because we are diving deep into what might be the most pivotal episode of Peacemaker Season 2 so far. Episode 3, titled Another Rick Up My Sleeve, revealed a lot about both past and present relationships with Harcourt and Chris, but also Harcourt and Rick Flag Jr. There is so much to get into in this episode, so let's waste no time. Let's break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. We open with a scene from 3 years ago in the new DCU canon. We see Amelia Harcourt waking up next to no other than Rick Flag Jr., as it is revealed in this conversation that they were involved in a full-blown affair. As Harcourt mentions June, aka Enchantress, who we met back in 2016's Suicide Squad. Now, for those who don't remember, James Gunn's Suicide Squad in 2021 served as both a sequel to the 2016 film, but also it was a soft reboot. So again, it's very clear that James Gunn is still picking and choosing what things from the DCEU are going to now fit into the canon of the DCU. Now Rick is afraid to break things off with June, well, because she's a sorceress with earth-destroying abilities, but Rick is willing to risk it all for this relationship. Rick really wants to take their relationship to the next level, but Harcourt doesn't want to complicate their current relationship between them as friends. Now as she leaves the room, she reminds him that he's got an important day ahead of him, as this conversation all took place hours before the events of 2021, The Suicide Squad. As we get quick flashes to what happened in that film, and again we're reminded that Peacemaker did kill Rick Flag Jr. To me, I thought this opening scene had huge implications to the story. This just adds so much more depth and complexity to why Harcourt treated Peacemaker with such disdain in most of season 1 of Peacemaker. It also explains why we see her being so hesitant to potentially exploring a more romantic relationship with Chris, because as this opening scene just showed us, she and Rick Flag Jr. had not only a friendship but also an intimate relationship, and Peacemaker took that away from her, as she even said that this was her only true friend. And come to think of it, it's crazy to think that in both dimensions, both Earths, our Chris has taken away Harcourt's lovers. Of course, we know Chris killed Rick Flag Jr. in this Earth, but he's also responsible for the death of the other world's Peacemaker, who we know was Harcourt's lover as well. It almost seems like in a way that James Gunn's alluding to that certain things, no matter the circumstance, no matter the Earth or the dimension, some things are just bound to happen with certain characters. Which brings us to our Chris currently in, let's call this Earth 2, as he's woken up by his brother Keith, who is worried about the blood found in the library, but also a potential drug relapse. We see that Chris continued to text the Earth 2 Harcourt and wanted to meet up with her, and he realizes that their meeting is less than 30 minutes away. As we watch, Chris rushes to find something to wear from his doppelganger's closet and discovers a secret stash of pills hidden inside, which confirms Keith's worries about his brother's addiction to pills. Now in a panic to meet this Earth's Harcourt, Chris has to grill Keith for information, raising his brother's suspicions. But he eventually gets what he needs from his brother, as Harcourt in this Earth still works for Argus, and he gets to ride the most amazing motorcycle Chris has ever seen, and it's the decked out Peace Cycle. As we watch as Chris cruises the streets with his peace cycle, we see people are happy to see their hero as they throw up the peace sign at him. We see the love continues as some kid starts crying after Peacemaker responds to him. He also gets flashed by some random woman. Chris is beyond happy to get this level of recognition and appreciation, and says to himself that this is the best dimension ever because this is exactly what he's always wanted. Now back on Earth 1, the 11th Street kids are dealing with their own hangovers and drama. Adebayo is playing relationship therapist for Harcourt about whatever went down on a party boat with Chris, but Harcourt continues to shut it down. Now Adrian saves Harcourt from Adebayo's 21 questions by sharing his deepest and darkest secrets, which include his love of owls, dolphins, manta rays, and spiders. Now Harcourt's had enough of Adrian's shenanigans and has him check in on Economos while her and Adebayo head up to the rooftop. Now on the roof, Adebayo continues to press Harcourt about what happened at the party between her and Chris, and she also brings up all the positives about Chris and how he could be a good catch for her. Harcourt assures Adebayo that no matter how good Chris may be on paper and how much he's changed over the years, he and her will never be a thing. Again, knowing that she and Flag were romantic and that Chris killed him, we can now understand why she can't be with Chris. Speaking of, back on Earth 2, Chris arrives at Argus. We see a security guard is happy to see Peacemaker, but the conversation takes a bit of a turn as he brings up a recent doctor visit, and not knowing how to respond, Chris says that everything was positive, but not knowing that the visit was actually a check-in for cancer. So now I'm wondering if this Earth's Peacemaker was a pill addict or if he was just taking pills to actually fight his cancer. Either way, it appears that things weren't perfect for this Earth's Peacemaker before dying. Now, as I predicted last week, we see Chris arrives on Harcourt's floor at Argus, and he comes face to face with another ghost from his past, and it's Rick Flag Jr. Now, this Earth's Rick is alive and well and dating Harcourt, but he's a bit different here. as he's clearly insecure, thinking Chris is here to win back Harcourt. Now again, I have to point out the emotional impact that this moment has on Chris in this scene, as this is another example of him having to come to face with his past and coming face to face with another person he's killed in his dimension. Now going back to Harcourt, us meeting this Earth's version of her, she seems to be a little bit softer, more friendlier, a little bit more chipper than our Harcourt, as she gives Chris a hug as Flag watches awkwardly as he attempts to spy on the conversation from afar. Now as they go for a walk, it feels more like a date as they walk past this giant mural celebrating the hero's top trio. We see them both having this moment of happiness together that seems new for the both of them, considering both of their experiences with each of their alternate selves is just much different for them. We see them getting hot dogs, they share some laughs, and we again see this much kinder, loving Harcourt greeting the dog, and the look on Chris' face says it all. He is head over heels in love with this version of Harcourt. As they take a seat, Harcourt acknowledges how less arrogant this version of Chris is, as Chris shares how he's changed in many ways, but of course it's from his personal experience on his Earth, not this one, but regardless, it's working because Harcourt can see that he's a different person. Now with this, Harcourt is willing to reconsider their relationship status and things are going great, but this is interrupted by a person who literally explodes right in front of them. This may be a sign from the universe that this isn't going to work for them, as we see the Sons of Liberty are in action. Introduced in the comics in March of 1991 in Superman Volume 2, Issue 53, Sons of Liberty was a secret American ultra-patriotic paramilitary organization that sought for the overthrow of the United States government. Now during the takeover, you notice that the Sons of Liberty brought up this character by the name of Jerry a couple times, which isn't a coincidence. I believe this was actually a nod to the creator of Sons of Liberty, Jerry Ordway. We watch as the Sons of Liberty take over the Evergreen DMV, as this has been a recent ongoing mission of theirs by destroying one governmental agency a week until their demands are met. We see a now suitless Peacemaker take action as he makes his way to the roof to stop them before they blow up the entire block, as Chris goes full Rambo mode and kills one of the Sons with an axe to the head. He then knifes one of them in the eye with their own knife, followed by him taking one of them out with a printer, and next he goes John Wick and grabs some pencils and kills another one. As the others set the detonator off and attempt to escape, we see Chris catches them in the stairwell and kills them with ease by shooting them all. As the clock is running out, Chris disconnects all the wires and he gets lucky as this stops it from going off. Meanwhile, outside with the escape helicopter, Keith arrives and kills the rest of the Sons as the civilians applaud in celebration of the top trio yet again saving the day. Now, a few things I want to discuss about this scene. First and foremost, that scene was a complete badass moment. Seeing Chris kill those people in the most Peacemaker violent way reminded me of the kill-off he had with Bloodsport in the Suicide Squad film. Which, to that point, Chris never said that he wouldn't kill again after what happened in season 1. He would only do that if it was necessary. But the way he took out the Sons of Liberty makes me wonder if he being here in this Earth will make him go back to his old and more killer ways. Now, another thing I noticed in this scene was this Earth's Harcourt didn't jump into the fight. Our Harcourt would have been right beside him, guns blazing. But this one was okay watching on the sideline, confirming that she's not just nicer, but also not a field agent potentially. Could this be her biggest flaw? She may be nicer, but doesn't have the same level of heroism in her. Now, while all that was happening, back on Earth 1, Bardo is furious that John Economos didn't share that Agee would pose a threat to the agents after he put 5 agents in the ICU, as she brings in the world's foremost eagle hunter, Red State Wild, to kill our favorite eagle, Agee. Bardo is now prepared to take action against Chris after the recent dimensional rift triggered by him, which makes Argus afraid that similar events will occur that happened in Metropolis with Lex Luthor back in the Superman film. Economos now caught between a rock and a hard place, having to pick between helping or getting fired as he decides to join Argus. Now, if things couldn't get worse, John Economos finds out that he has to partner with a new agent by the name of Rick Jagger, aka Judo Master. monster. Which I was such a fan of this character. I'm so excited to see him back and really excited to see him and John go back and forth because realistically, no one in the 11th Street Kids was able to take him down besides John. So I'm really excited to see their back and forth moving forward. The episode ends with Chris texting Harcourt, tempted by this perfect life, but knowing that he has to go back to his own dimension to say goodbye. He shares a drink with his brother Keith, who offers his support, worried about his brother's demons. Keith reassures him that no matter the situation, he can always come to him and tell him anything, no matter what it is. Now, after hearing this, we see Chris getting emotional after what his brother said to him, and it just makes him even more sure that this is the Earth that he needs to be in. But unfortunately, even though he's now filled with confidence, he's got big problems to deal with back home. As we see Argus arriving at his house, locked and loaded with weapons and orders to take down Peacemaker by any means necessary. As we see John Economos in the van, filled with people ready to take down his friend. And the question is, will John comply in this mission, or will he interfere by buying Peacemaker some time to escape? As Chris walks out of the chamber back into his room, not knowing what's waiting for him on the other side. What's going on, Peacemakers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are discussing and breaking down Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 4, titled Need I Say Door, which has its moments in this episode, but as I'll explain later, I'm starting to have some major concerns for the rest of this season. We've got some things to discuss, so let's waste no more time. Let's break it all down, full spoilers ahead. We kick things off with a flashback 35 years ago, deep into the woods. We see a younger Agee Smith with Keith and Chris, and they're out hunting. Now, what they spot isn't your typical deer, as Agee shoots something as it's trying to hide. Now, as they approach this thing, it's not an animal, it's an alien creature screaming in agony, and its insides are hanging out. Now, as we watch this alien creature seamlessly begging for mercy, we see Keith yelling at his dad not to kill it. But we know Agee doesn't listen to those boys, as he doesn't hesitate as he finishes it off, and then he slaps Keith for telling him not to kill it. Now, in the distance, they notice a doorway is open. It's the gateway into the quantum unfolding storage area. As we see, Chris picks up a mysterious object that the alien was carrying, an object we'll see later on this episode. Now, this opening scene served two purposes. One, it continues to show the dramatic upbringing of Chris, but it also serves as a quick origin story of how Agee came into possession of the quantum unfolding storage area. Now, James Gunn has hammered home that Peacemaker is key to the future of the DCU, and he explicitly said that it ties into the recently announced Men of Tomorrow. Now, we've already seen Lex Luthor with his own portal and Superman, so these interdimensional gateways are clearly going to be very important for the future of the DCU. But going back to the scene, I have a couple questions. One, where did this alien come from? Is this alien some type of Martian? Does it have any greater ties to the DC universe? And why is it on Earth? Now, we know this chamber isn't just a storage area, it's a doorway to something bigger, potentially dangerous, and definitely connected to the overarching multiversal potential interdimensional narrative that James Gunn seems to be building. Now, flash forward back to present day as we see John Economos is still in the back of the van with Rip Jagger and Bardot as they're en route to Peacemaker's house. Now, we watch as John and Rip are catching up, engaging in that quintessential, hilarious, awkward James Gunn banter that we all tend to love when it works.
Remember that time you smashed my car with a truck? Snuck up behind me and hit me in the head with a tire iron?
Yeah, why?
Curious.
But we see John is trying to be discreet as he's sending a text message to Chris and trying to warn him that they're coming. Now, the message that John sends Chris is a masterpiece of gibberish. It is utter nonsense with more grammatical errors than a kindergarten spelling test. But I'll give John some slack because obviously he's in the back of a van, he's trying to not be seen, he's under all this pressure, so he didn't have the time to do any spell checking. Now, meanwhile, back at Chris's, he's trying to decipher John's cryptic message, and he struggles at first, but he eventually puts two and two together and realizes that he needs to get the hell out of Dodge. Now, before leaving, we see him taking that mysterious object that he picked up from the alien from the opening flashback scene. as Chris and Agee bolt out the back just as Argus agents make their way in. But Chris isn't quite fast enough, as we see Rip Jagger eventually catches up to him, and we get our round 3 between Rip Jagger and Chris, aka Peacemaker. Now I wish the fight was a little bit longer, but it was a good little scrap. It was brutal at points, good back and forth between the two characters, but we see Chris gets the upper hand, winning this round and making the head-to-head matchup the score of 2-1 in favor of our Peacemaker. But the drama isn't over yet, as Red Street Wild, a man whom obsession with Agee is reaching spiritual levels in this episode, he spots our eagle in the sky and is about to take the shot. But who swoops in? It is our MVP of this episode, John Economos, as he shoves him, knocking him out cold, saving Agee. Meanwhile, we catch up with Adebayo in this episode, who's excited because some important mail came in, and that is what she thinks to be important mail, and that is the Pro Soldier magazine. As she's about to text her wife the news, she gets a text from Chris saying that he needs her ASAP. Now, speaking to Adebayo, as I've said in previous episode breakdowns, she's one of my favorite characters of the show. But 4 episodes in, I don't know if the show knows what to do with her. Like, Danielle Brooks is an Oscar-nominated actress. She was one of the standouts in season 1. I like the friendship that we see between her and Peacemaker, especially what we see in this episode. But I don't know if the show knows what to do with her. With the whole wife situation, her security this plot hasn't gone anywhere. I just hope that by the end of the season, they give her more to do and they pick up the story. Because right now, like I said, she's just there. Like, her and Adrian have nothing to do this season so far besides providing some jokes every now and then, and again, being good friends. But I want more from these characters that I really enjoy, and she's one of them. Now, back with John, after Wild wakes up, we see John making up this story, claiming that an eagle came out of nowhere and knocked him out. But John's storytelling inadvertently recharges Wild's already wild theories. Red is now convinced that Agee is not just an eagle, but he's a primal eagle. He's the ultimate eagle, the one that rules all the eagles. As he claims his third eye is now open, and this has officially become the most important mission of his life. Now, Adebayo picks up Chris, and we finally get some important understanding of how these portals actually work. Chris reveals that he's moved the portal twice before as a kid. Now, the mention of his helmets being created are still a mystery, but he fills Adebayo in on this whole dimensional dilemma that he's caught himself in.
It's not the same, okay? This isn't my mind playing tricks on me, all right? It's one of the 99 doorways to other dimensions in there. And it leads to a parallel world that's almost exactly like ours, but it's better.
Now, while Chris and Adebayo are at his grandfather's house trying to reopen the portal, we see John is doing his best to stall with the Argus agents. Well, mission accomplished by John, because we see he buys them just enough time for Chris to get the portal to relocate to them. Meanwhile, Rick Flag Sr. gets the news that the portal is gone, as he makes a call to no other than Harcourt. And speaking of Harcourt, we see her back at another bar doing what she does best, and that's getting into a fight. Seriously, Harcourt, big fan of hers, but she needs another hobby. Now, back at her place, we see Rick Flag Sr. is waiting outside her door. And immediately we can see that there's already some established history between the two characters. Harcourt knows the way he likes his coffee, and we see him calling her kid. It's clear that they go way back. Obviously, we found that out from the previous episode that Rick Flag Jr. and her had a relationship, so it's safe to assume that Rick Flag Sr. knew about this. Now, for all of you, including myself, Creature Commando fans out there, we get not one but 2 references to that show. Harcourt mentions Rick Flag Sr. being injured, which is a direct nod to him almost dying in a fight against Clayface as seen in Creature Commandos. We also see Rick Flag Sr. casually drop the name Pokelistan, which was the location in which we saw the events take place in Creature Commandos. Now, Rick takes notice of a picture of her with the 11th Street kids and brings up what she told him at his son's funeral.
At the end of the day, Smith killed your son because Waller ordered him to.
Yet me and
The Coles, Daniel, and Ricky in Corte Maltese, we all defied Waller's orders when she went too far.
Now we can see in this scene that Rick Flag Sr. maybe picked up a couple tips from Waller during his time with them working together. As we see in this scene, he's basically manipulating Harcourt. As we see him confirming that Waller did indeed black book her, preventing her from being hired by any other agency for the rest of her life. As we watch, Harcourt expresses how unfair it is how Waller singled her out after what happened last season, and she has no job in sight and her livelihood is suffering and is being affected by this. But again, the manipulation comes into play as Rick is here to change it all for her.
I'm thinking there may be a way for you to get back in the good graces of the U.S. government.
Anything.
You have to bring us Peacemaker.
Now back with Chris in Autobio, he confirms that the Pro Soldier magazine ad was a total scam. He goes on to tell her that he accidentally killed his alternate dimension self as Autobio, the ever voice of reason, tries to talk some sense back into him. She points out how problematic his obsession with his other dimension is and how delusional he is to think that the answers to his problems lie there and how everyone in that universe thinks he's someone else. But Chris is convinced he got the short end of the stick. He believes he and his alternate self were supposed to switch places and he was meant to live in that other dimension. As I've said many times, it's a classic case of grass being greener if the grass was on a whole nother dimension. Now Adrian arrives as Chris, still needing answers and a plan, texts Harcourt to meet up. Now, it's looking likely that when Chris enters the dimension again, that Autobio will probably be tagging along, if only to prove herself that it actually is real. Now, if that happens, the online theories of the other dimension being actually Earth X will probably be confirmed. Now, for those who aren't familiar, Earth X is a pretty dark place where Germany won World War II and the Nazis became the ruling power of the world. So yeah, if Autobio joins him there, it won't be a welcome party, and Chris might finally realize that this wasn't the best dimension ever that he's been dreaming of. Now, as this episode comes to an end, it sets up a tense situation. It appears Harcourt has decided to rejoin Argus. She gives Rick Flag Sr. the location that Chris gave her to meet up.
You're not taking the Peacemaker down alone.
We'll have everyone there. You're doing the right thing, Amelia.
I know I am.
As Chris wants to ask her one last question before making his decision on whether he's gonna go back to the other dimension permanently. And finally, in a moment of pure unadulterated Peacemaker absurdity, we cut back to Wild. He's performing a ridiculous ritual, chanting and summoning some unexpected powers, all in his deranged quest to track down Agee. Now, what kind of powers he has, we don't know the bounds of it, but it seems to be pretty dangerous. Meanwhile, at the meeting where Chris sent Harcourt, we see her sitting there being conflicted. As Rick Flag Sr. and the other agents are getting in position, ready to snatch Peacemaker the moment he arrives. As the trap is sprung, the loyalties are divided, and the other dimension is calling. What's going on, Peacemakers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are discussing Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 5, titled Back to the Future. Man, I'm going to be honest with you all, I'm struggling at this point in the season, but there are some good things that we'll be discussing, as well as some bad things about this episode, so let's not waste any time and break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. We open this week's episode once again with a flashback. 3 years ago at the funeral of Rick Flag Jr., and the air is thick with grief. We see John Economos paying his last respects, but our focus quickly shifts to Harcourt sitting alone, staring at the casket of her one true friend. Behind her sits Rick Flag Sr., broken by his loss. He leans forward and starts mentioning how utterly embarrassing it was sending his son overseas not to fight some honorable war, but instead fight a gigantic alien starfish with a bunch of clowns by his side. It's kind of ironic hearing Rick Flag Sr. say that, considering the mission that he found himself on in Creature Commando Season 1, which included a team that I love, but it had a team with a dead corpse, a robot, and a weasel. Now, Flag has regrets about the life they've chosen, as he knows Harcourt can't tell him who pulled the trigger, but he still asks. He tells her that his son loved her, despite his relationships with other women, and yes, they were friends, but there was definitely something more. And you can tell that Harcourt shares a similar sentiment about Rick Flag Jr. Now, Rick Flag Sr. tells her that she's family now and that his son would have wanted that and he'll always look out for her. You know, seeing this yet again continues to be a highlight for me, and that's Harcourt's emotional arc. I really found this opening to be an incredibly tender and vulnerable moment for a usually tough character in both Harcourt and Rick Flag Sr. Now, before Rick walks away, we get a call back to what Rick said to her in last week's episode as she promises,
Person who did this, that person, they'll pay. I'll make sure of it.
Thanks, kid.
Again, I just found this scene to be phenomenal. It wasn't used as exposition, there's raw emotions in the scene, and it just deepens the history and the motivations of these characters. You feel the profound loss of Rick Flag Jr. for both his father and Harcourt, which is driving her present day struggles with being friends with the man who killed her true friend. Now back to present day, we are in the park from last episode where Harcourt is patiently waiting for Peacemaker with Argus agents lurking. Judo Master is given orders to take the shot as Peacemaker arrives, but Peacemaker is smart and he's not just walking in freely or unaware of his surroundings. We watch as he makes sure to have no clear shots, no sniper looking down at him. I really found this scene to be hilarious as we watch Peacemaker playing frisbee with dogs, kicking a soccer ball around with the little kids, giving random strangers hugs, all to avoid being a target. Again, I found this to be hilarious, but it's also a smart reminder that underneath all the goofiness, Peacemaker is a highly trained killer and knows how to navigate through these type of situations. Chris makes it to Harcourt and sits down, and without missing a beat, he rips off her mic, as he sits where he's not in direct line of sight. Now, I'm glad to be proven wrong because last week I thought Harcourt might have sold Chris out. Turns out she gave Peacemaker a secret code word, a warning to not come to the park because it's a setup, as she wants him to leave immediately. But we see Peacemaker isn't budging. Chris is here for one thing. He needs to know if whatever happened on this mysterious boat trip meant anything to Harcourt. Now, as the Argus agents close in, Peacemaker doesn't care. He presses her on an answer, as she gives it to him, and it's a cold, hard no. It didn't mean anything, as she blames it on the alcohol and wished that it never happened. Now, Peacemaker asks if it has anything to do with Rick Flag Jr., as Harcourt tells him that they were never going to be anything because, again, he killed her one and true only friend. Now, before he can fully process her answer and respond, Argus agents rush in on him. Now, Peacemaker snaps into action, breaking one of the agent's hand, and he uses him as an actual shield. Now here's where we get a nice little comic reference for Bardot, who draws her gun on Peacemaker. She has a fatal shot that she could take on him as she awaits for Rick Flag Sr.'s orders. But here's where we get the cool part. We see she's ran a probability test on Chris' next move, and it's all seen from her POV within her eye, giving her stats on her actual shot. This was a fantastic comic book reference confirming her being turned into a cyborg by OMAC in the comics. Now Flag gives her the clear and Bardot is about to take the shot, but Harcourt runs in, tackling Peacemaker. He thinks that she's attacking him, but in reality she's just saved his life, as Bardot would have killed him. Now Harcourt quickly chokes him out, much to Rick Flag Sr.'s approval. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Adrian and Ads are outside. Ads gets a call about her security ad. It starts off promising and she's so excited this could be her first client. But as the conversation goes on, the questions get weirder, but still she confirms an appointment for the next evening. Now her excitement is instantly deflated when Adrian, with a deadpan expression, explains what the client meant by Greek over the phone and its meaning in prostitution. Yeah, that's not the type of security that Adebayo was looking for. Poor Ads. And that poor Ads has two meanings for me here. One being the obvious disappointment that her business has yet to take off. But secondly, her whole presence in this season so far has been reduced to nothing but an unhappy relationship and this security gig, and now she has a sex joke. Now in the woods, Red Wild is still on the hunt for Eagly as he poisons a rat for bait. Now we watch as a tiny fox takes the bait instead and sadly dies. Now Red, completely unbothered, gets out the big gun to take out Eagly. More on that here in a second. Now back at Argus HQ, Bardot confronts Harcourt about getting in her way. As we watch as Peacemaker is now in Argus' possession, he's handcuffed and he's led past John as he gives him a casual hey. Now in the break room, John and Harcourt have a conversation about what happened at the park. And it's here that we get the confirmation that Bardot is indeed a cyborg.
Cyborg.
Yeah, part robot. She was in a plane crash, all crushed up, and Argus replaced half her body with machinery.
Now here's where we see Harcourt is afraid that Rick Flag Sr. will make Peacemaker disappear and kill him, fueled by the revenge for his son. Now Harcourt wants John to book him, so it's not easy to make him vanish without a trace. Now Economos is afraid of losing his job, but he eventually agrees. Now here we get a moment that I've been waiting for all season, and that's Rick Flag Sr. coming face to face with Peacemaker. As Flag gives orders to remove Peacemaker's handcuffs, to close the shades and turn off the camera, and everyone leaves the room, making it just between these two men. We watch as Peacemaker apologizes to Rick Flag and tells him that he admired his son and he was caught in a very dark place in the world when he killed Rick Flag Jr. But apologies aren't enough, as Rick Flag Sr. starts to beat the absolute shit out of Peacemaker. He wants Peacemaker to fight back, almost begging him to, but Peacemaker refuses, taking every single punch. Meanwhile, Economos manages to book Chris on the record, as Bardot bursts in and tells Rick Flag Sr. that Chris has been booked. Now, due to protocol, because Chris is officially booked on the records, Rick Flag Sr. decides to let him go, which to me made absolutely no sense. In my mind, these rules and procedures and protocols are thrown out the window when you live in a world with gods and monsters and aliens, and you know you have a known criminal and an elite killer in your possession who also has access to a quantum chamber that could be world-threatening. And you have to let him go because of some technicality? I call BS on this ridiculous logic and the writing in this scene. Now back to the scene, we watch as Adebayo and Adrian arrive to pick up their bruised and battered friend. But as they drive off, we see Judo Master is tasked to follow them by Rick Flag Sr. I don't know, man. I'm still struggling with the idea that if Peacemaker is such a threat to the security of the world, or as Flag says later in the episode, the security of the United States, why isn't there more intel or more of a need of maybe other superheroes? Like, why isn't the Justice Gang on this case? Like, why aren't they being told to go in to take down Peacemaker? Also, Rick Flag Sr. does something later in this episode that also pissed me off that we'll talk about. But again, I'm just thinking that the stakes that the show thinks it has really doesn't exist. Now, I couldn't make this out entirely, but on Rick Flag Sr.'s computer, we see that there's a detailed report about an RSL, repulsive spatial looping, in reference to a trial with space and time and a quantum analysis. Now, this could just be a report that he's making about the quantum unfolding chamber, giving it off to like other people in the US government, or this could be that this is saying that they're doing some type of experiments, or that Argus wants to do experiments, and this connects to the greater DC universe. Meanwhile, Rick, despite beating the hell out of Peacemaker, he assures Bardot that his main objective is to protect the United States and that he allowed Harcourt to save him. And that way, eventually, it would lead them to finding the quantum unfolding chamber. Now, Bardot was impressed by Flag's thinking, and there seems to be some type of romantic tension between the two. As we know, Rick Flag Sr. is no stranger to getting busy with the ladies. Creature Commando showed us that. Now back in the car, Peacemaker didn't see what Harcourt did as saving him, but instead he feels like she betrayed him to get her job back and that John Economos was the only one looking out for him and saved his life. As Peacemaker says that he's done with it all, hinting at him wanting to go back to the other dimension permanently. Now they return to the cabin to drop off Peacemaker, and during all this we see Eagly is now ganged up. Red Wild mistakenly kills an eagle thinking it was Eagly, but it's actually a decoy, and the real Eagly leads a group of vengeful eagles in a deadly attack and ultimately killing him. Now this might be a hot take, but the whole Red Wild versus Eagly plot just was dumb to me. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad Eagly is safe and he killed him, but you're telling me that James Gunn was more interested in giving this unnecessary plot to an eagle versus fleshing out ads more or giving Adrian more to do? Again, shout out to Eagly handling his business, but come on. Now, as the dust settles, we see Peacemaker make his decision as we see him writing a letter to his friends saying goodbye. Now outside, Judo Master calls in for backup as we see Peacemaker activates the quantum bag and enters the chamber. Not knowing what to do next, we see Judo Master writes a note letting them know that he went after Peacemaker in the chamber. Now earlier I had mentioned Rick Flag Sr. pissed me off in the episode, and what I meant by that is the way he's handling the situation. We see him laughing and joking and flirting with Bardot at the end of the episode, and I'm just thinking to myself, he's just a terrible director for Argus. There's no way in hell that if Waller was still the director of Argus, that Peacemaker would still be alive. She wouldn't be flirting with her co-workers. She would have had Deadshot or Bloodsport come in to take him out. And I just think that Rick Flag Sr., I like him as a character, but he, again, is a terrible director for Argus. And honestly, the handling of Argus as a group, as an entity in the DC universe so far, their whole thing this season has been a complete joke to me. Now, Ads and Adrian arrive, but it's too late. Now, they see that Judo Master followed Peacemaker into the chamber, and they find a letter that Peacemaker wrote as they realize that he closed the portal, making it that he can't return. Now, we catch up with Chris, who's now in the other dimension, as his brother in this dimension, Keith, tells him to suit up to take on this kaiju as he's introduced to Eagly. Now we watch and hear the letter being read out that Peacemaker wrote saying goodbye to his friends. Now Peacemaker also left behind the alien dimensional device to them to turn into Argus so they can get a promotion, as we see Adrian bawling his eyes out because his best friend just left this planet. As we see our Peacemaker with Keith and Agee and Eagly taking fight in the air as they take on this kaiju. Now next morning, we see Harcourt tells Adebayo that Peacemaker was wrong about what she did, because what she did, again, saved his life. And speaking of saving, we see Harcourt takes that dimensional device and tells the others it's time to get Peacemaker back. Now in the other dimension again, on the news, we see that the top trio group has taken out the kaiju monster, which by the way also looked like the same monster from Superman. But we see Peacemaker is back at Argus' office and sees Harcourt from the other dimension, and they race towards each other in happiness. What is going on, Peacemakers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are breaking down Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 6, titled Ignorance is Chris, a perfect title to describe this episode. Now, this marks the return of James Gunn directing, and what a great episode to return on. Now, if you all have been watching my previous breakdowns, I've shared my thoughts about how I thought Lex Luthor was going to cameo in this season. I also thought that Earth X was going to be coming true, so the surprises didn't necessarily make me lose my mind, but it's still all about the execution, and I thought this episode finally had stakes, it had great tension, and we finally are going somewhere. So let's not waste any time and break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. Now, for the first time in weeks, we actually kick off this episode without a flashback. Instead, we see our Chris living it up in his other dimension as the top trio are celebrating at a restaurant for their recent big win against a kaiju, as we notice Harcourt is joining them as well. Everyone's happy and all smiles as we see a group of kids want to take a selfie with their heroes, but as the picture's taken, we notice their faces are all being distorted. To me, this distorted image is essentially Chris's mindset right now about how he thinks his universe is perfect. As we'll find out later, this universe is far from perfect, as this was a great setup for some foreshadowing for later. Meanwhile, back on Earth Prime, the remaining 11th Street kids are now at Adrian's place. Inside, they meet Adrian's mom, who loves her little boy, and she's so thrilled that he has friends over, at least for the first time since he used to play D&D. Now, Adrian treats his mother like a teenager who wishes their parents were invisible. And to give Adrian more fuel to be embarrassed by his mom, she tells Harcourt, as she calls her, that she was upset to learn that her and Adrian broke up. Now, this obviously completely catches Harcourt by surprise, as the reason they broke up was because of her lack of understanding how to make proper love. Now, inside Adrian's secret room, we see that he's basically a mini Heisenberg with millions of dollars of blood money and tons of drugs, and also a Beanie Baby collection. Now, we watch as Ads activates the dimensional device, and in doing so, they get hit with a full-body cocaine baptism. But hey, at least it worked, as they open the quantum chamber and it's time to find Chris. They search for the right door in the chamber to find Chris, and lucky for them, I will admit there was a lot of conveniences in this episode, this being one of them. They don't waste much time in finding the correct door, and another convenience, Adrian knows the code as they enter the other dimension. Now, as they look around this Peacemaker house, we see Keith pops up and we see the others have to hide, and our Harcourt has to put on an act and kind of act a little bit more chipper than usual as she decides to take a ride to Argus with Keith. Now, meanwhile, John tries not to throw up because of how weird everything is, as Adrian is so determined to find his other self in this universe. Now, back in the car, we see Harcourt learns the greatest bands in this universe are the Beatles, led by Mick Jagger, and the other group by the name of the Halloweens. But Harcourt is taking notice of something more importantly, and that's that everyone that she sees in town is white. Now, at Argus, turns out that cocaine shower had lingering effects, as a K9 unit dog at Argus sniffs out Harcourt and they handcuff her, and just as that's happening, Chris walks in and sees all this going down. Now, this is probably one of my favorite scenes of this episode because it was just so damn funny. We're back with Adrian, who's having the time of his life, noticing all the differences he's finding from this dimension versus his dimension. He finds his house, and again, conveniently, keys he has to open his door, opens this universe's secret door, and inside, Adrian meets his doppelganger. Now, this Adrian doesn't immediately try to kill him like the Peacemaker did to our Peacemaker, but instead they share a very good laugh and they recreate the Spider-Man meme. But now let's switch gears from the comedy into a little political maneuvering. As we catch up with Rick Flag Sr., who is desperate to find Peacemaker, he sets up a sit-down with a prisoner in Belle Reve. Now, as we enter the prison, we see Flag awaits the prisoner, and it's someone walking up with a cane and a very bald head, and it's the one and only Lex Luthor. Now, like I said up top, I predicted Lex Luthor was going to cameo at some point, so it wasn't super surprising, but it was still great to see Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor in this rated R television show. It just goes to show how quickly the DCU is interconnected with movies and shows and animated and all the different stuff they have going so far. So again, it was great to see, but let's break down the actual scene here. Now, he shares with Flag his unpleasant experiences in being locked up so far, but he's even more upset to learn how metahumans like Superman and the Justice Gang are basically running things outside now. Now, after creating the dimensional rift in Metropolis, we find out that Lex Luthor was sentenced to 265 years in Belle Reve. But Rick Flag Sr. is here to offer him a transfer to a non-metahuman prison in exchange for his help. Now, Lex Luthor mentions having a scanner that can find the dimensional portal, and Flag says he will give Lex Luthor the opportunity for redemption. Now, Lex Luthor and Rick Flag Sr. come to an agreement, and he's going to be transferred to a non-metahuman prison by the name of Van Cole, which, if you all do not know, it's another popular prison within the DC Comics. As Rick Flag Sr. tells Bardo that they're now partners with Lex Luthor. Now, James Gunn himself a couple weeks ago said how this show, Peacemaker Season 2, will serve as a prequel to Man of Tomorrow, and this conversation 100% sounds like this is the way that Lex Luthor is going to finally break out of prison. With him going to a non-metahuman prison, I would imagine the security isn't as beefed up as Belle Reve. He also doesn't have to worry about metahumans stopping him and getting in his way or them having sex next door to his cell. But again, I feel like this is his way out. This is probably setting up a situation where he's going to help Superman and Man of Tomorrow take down, most likely, Brainiac, as the script that released a couple days ago kind of confirmed, or at least suggests that Brainiac will be the main villain. And I just imagine Lex Luthor is just plotting to take advantage of this whole situation. As we know, Lex Luthor is definitely going to be playing the long game here. Now, my question is, will we be seeing Lex Luthor in next week's episode in the finale, or was this like a one-and-done cameo? My gut's telling me that we're going to probably see him one more time, but if not, again, this was a perfect way to set up how we're going to be seeing Lex Luthor operating with Argus when it comes to Man of Tomorrow. Now, back to the drama. Chris visits Harcourt, who is being detained. They exchange some heated words as Harcourt explains to him that she took him down last week to save his life, as we talked about in last week's breakdown. Now, as they continue the conversation, they clear up the air about some things as they talk about her and Rick Flag Jr. and how she once hated Chris because of what happened. But after what they experienced in saving the world in season 1, obviously things changed. Now, Chris admits to loving her and brings up the boat situation again, and she knows that he loves her, but she can't say it back, even if she did, because she tells Chris that she can't access her feelings like he does, as she calls herself a nightmare of a person. This was a really good emotional scene. I feel like this is something we've been waiting for from weeks, but it was good to kind of have them air all their laundry out. But even with all these cards now on the table, Chris still feels like he has to stay in this dimension. Now, back with our favorite doppelgangers from alternate dimensions, we see that the Adrians are practically identical except for this one thing. This dimension's Peacemaker absolutely hates his world's Peacemaker, and he has dedicated his life to tearing that Peacemaker down because, just like the comics, Peacemaker and Vigilante are arch enemies. Meanwhile, Az decides to take a walk outside while John stays behind and clean up Eagly's mess. Now outside, Az sees a white woman drive by and she nicely waves at her, but the woman in the car doesn't wave back. Instead, she looks at her and the look on her face says it all, pure disgust and hatred. Now back at the house, we see Agee returns and Harcourt returns to work while the other Harcourt is leaving Argus. Now while all this is going down, we see Harcourt mentions to Chris how she hasn't seen a single person of color since arriving. As that's happening, we see Keith driving back home and he sees Az walking in the street. He immediately stops and honks his horn to warn the neighbors that a black person has got out and they chase after her. Now him saying a black got out, to me sounds like they've captured all the black and all the brown people of this town. I don't know if it expands to like the entire universe, but I think in this town, it wouldn't surprise me if they led the charge. And by they, I'm talking about Keith and Agee, like they've gathered all the people of color in this town and have them hidden somewhere in the city. Now back at Argus, we watch as Chris picks up a flag on someone's desk and he sees a particular symbol, and we know what that symbol means, which indeed confirms what we talked about weeks ago, and that's that Chris is on Earth X. Now for those who aren't familiar, Earth X is a pretty dark place where Germany won World War II and the Nazis became the ruling power of the world. Now back at the house, John Economos is taken down by Agee, who puts a knife in his hand, and John, being John, unfortunately spills the beans on our Peacemaker, killing that dimension's Peacemaker. As our last scene shows us back at Argus, and Harcourt orders the guards to arrest our Harcourt. Meanwhile, we see Ads is running in the streets for her life. What is going on, Peacemakers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're breaking down Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 7, titled Like a Keith in the Night. This is our penultimate episode before the finale, and I'll be honest, not my favorite, but there are some unexpected surprises. There's an emotional moment that was just really important for our main character Peacemaker, so let's not waste any time and break down this episode. Full spoilers ahead. We open immediately on the last moments of the previous episode with Chris and Harcourt at Argus. Chris finally processing the massive undeniable signs, including the literal mule of Hitler, meant he was in love with this terrible Earth and dating a fascist as he breaks things off with Earth X Harcourt. There's no time for him to explain to Earth X Harcourt why he's breaking up with her, as he immediately has to focus on an exit strategy. And that is just pure violence, as we get a pretty awesome team up of him and Harcourt taking down the security guards together. Now the escape plan is going okay at first, but then they arrive to the main entrance where they're met by more Gunn's security guards, as Chris has to think quick on his feet and he uses his jetpack, and they escape using his peace cycle to outmaneuver the bullets being shot at them. Now I mentioned a couple weeks ago that Joel Kinnaman was only going to pop up in episode 3 based on his conversation on the official podcast with James Gunn after the Peacemaker episodes, but I was secretly hoping that he was going to maybe make one more appearance, and this would have been a great scene for him to pop up where him and Peacemaker maybe had to go toe-to-toe and Peacemaker had to take him down, but again, unfortunately I think this was a missed opportunity. Now back with John, who's now tied up at Augie's house, Keith arrives and Agee tells him the news about his brother. Now we get an interesting moment here that we'll elaborate on a little bit later, but Agee tells Keith that at some point he had a brief interaction with the other Earth Agee, and he could just sense that there was some level of evil coming off of him, but again, we'll discuss that a little bit later. But right now, the most important thing for them is they can't allow the other Chris, our Chris, to potentially let out that they have a dimensional chamber, so their plan is in place to capture that Chris before that even happens. Now back with Harcourt and Chris, we have a moment where we dip into the 90s, where we have this slow motion sequence on the peace cycle. We see Harcourt laying her head on Chris's shoulder and the music's playing in the background, and we have her grabbing his hand. Chris is in total disbelief because of this small moment of intimacy. Despite all the chaos going on, this is a moment he's been waiting for to get close with Harcourt. But unfortunately, it doesn't last long as they're now surrounded by the police, but suddenly the cavalry arrives in the form of Agee and Keith. Now, they kill the police to avoid the police getting their business out there, and they demand Chris and Harcourt join them if they want to live. Meanwhile, back with the A-Team, and that is our two Adrians, Earth X Adrian explains to our Adrian what the Sons of Liberty do on this Earth, and he confirms what we already knew. This is absolutely not a world built for any minorities, as they immediately mobilize to save Adebayo. Speaking of Ads, she definitely needs saving. As we catch up with her running for her life still, she makes a tactical error by running into a backyard and jumping into a pool, which I thought was just idiotic on her part, but I think it just plays into the craziness and the funniness of this show. But we watch an even crazier moment as the Nazis chase after her in the water. Little did they know, it's about to be a wet execution awaiting for them. Luckily for Ads, Judo Master arrives and in the most efficient kill of the night, throws a live telephone wire right into the pool, frying every single one of these pursuing fascists. Now later we get this unexpected bonding moment between Judo Master and him catching up Ads on this world, while they're eating snacks, having a good laugh, and playing some board games. Meanwhile, we see John still tied up trying to get Agee to untie him. Now, not to sound like a broken record, I've said it in the past that I have just really not liked how they've handled Adebayo this season. Seeing her and Judo Master having a little moment, playing board games, eating Cheetos, it's just, I wanted more ads this season. Like, even if next week she has a big moment, it still feels like a wasted season for her. Would have loved for her and Judo Master to maybe have more screen time back on the regular Prime Earth, or for her to interact with maybe more Vigilante. But again, this scene just made me upset because I'm like, man, I just love ads and I wish she had more to do this season. Now, as the evening approaches, back at the house, Chris tries to explain everything that led him into Earth X and how their Chris died and why he decided to come back and stay.
I wanted to feel what it felt like to have a family.
Now, Keith doesn't give two craps what Chris has to say because all he cares about is he wants to kill the man that killed his brother. Now, during this conversation, the police arrive and we get the return of Larry Fitzgibbon from this Earth as he wants to get answers for what happened to the police officers that recently died. Man, low-key, I was hoping that Sophie was going to reappear as well, but of course we know they can't work together because of this Earth, but it was nice to see Larry in this moment. Now, Larry ultimately gets rejected by Agee from entering his house to look for Chris. Now, in the distance, Ads and Judo Master are outside the house as both Adrians arrive and they try to figure out a way to get into the house. But before moving on, I did want to see maybe another round between Adrian and Judo Master based on what happened in season 1. But again, anytime Adrian was on screen, it was just pure entertainment. But here's where the real revelation comes in the form of Earth X Agee revealing who he is as a person. He rejects the label of being called a Nazi. He is deeply disillusioned with how his world is ran, and he doesn't agree with their extreme views.
I didn't create the problems in my world, Missy. I don't agree with them. I applaud you if your world is perfect and you fight every injustice you ever see.
He even hears how they brought a black woman in Ads into his world, and he scoffs at Keith for chasing her. He's not a good guy for murdering those cops, but he seems to not be anywhere near as evil as the Agee from season 1. He even offers them a safe passage back to the dimension if they promise to never return, even though our Chris is indirectly responsible for the death of his son. Which, by the way, Agee does admit that his version of Chris, his Earth Chris, wasn't a good guy. He loved his son, but he knew that he was a bad person. Now, as Agee delivers a surprisingly heartfelt speech about right and wrong and proving that even across dimensions, Peacemaker Dad has emotional depth. But as soon as he started talking about how good of a person he was, I knew something bad was coming, and that thing is in the form of Adrian, who doesn't care about the speeches. In perfect vigilante fashion, he crashes through the window and murders Agee with zero hesitation. Man, the Agee morality arc lasted for what, about 5 minutes? Now with Agee dead, the race to the dimensional chamber is on. Now with the police swarming the house, and just as everyone's about to head back to their Earth, Keith, blinded by vengeance, bursts through the wall and attacks Chris. Now the crew saves Chris and they dogpile Keith, relentlessly beating him up and almost killing him. Now this is where the episode, and this is what I wish the season would have been a little bit more emotionally satisfying. We watch a great moment from John Cena as an actor, as this is a traumatic moment for Chris, who was forced to relive the death of his brother. Even this alternate version, he feels bad for Keith. He doesn't want him to die, so we watch him screams for them to stop. The reason this scene works so well and why I think it's probably the strongest moment of this episode and one of the strongest moments of the season, think about when we first met Peacemaker in the Suicide Squad film and how he was so relentless in killing people by any means necessary, and just look how far he's come. He knows this Keith is not a good guy. This world that he's in is not a good world, but yet he doesn't want to fight violence with violence. Peacemaker is changing. He doesn't want to kill just for the sake of killing. Again, the emotional moment, the scream for them to stop, all was just fantastic, and like I said, it's the highlight of this episode for me. Now, as we wrap up, they finally jump to the dimensional chamber, but the consequences aren't over. Back on Earth X, we see Harcourt attempts to finish the job, aiming to shoot Keith in the head so he won't be able to chase Chris across dimensions. But just in the nick of time, the police come back again, forcing her to escape and leaving Earth X and Keith alive, who's crying in the back of an ambulance. Now this to me guarantees a future villain driven by revenge for his father and brother. I don't know if that's going to be an episode 8 finale or if this gets greenlit for season 3. I definitely hope that there is more to this Keith storyline in the near future. But also, I can't go without mentioning, seeing the two vigilantes saying goodbye to each other was an awesome moment. And I'm not going to lie, for a split second, I thought that one of the Adrians was going to die and maybe the other Adrian was going to come into our Earth, or maybe Earth X Adrian was going to want to come to Earth to kind of live in a better world. But we didn't see that happen. Now, while all that was happening, back on Earth, Rick Flag Sr. and Sydney, Lex Luthor's tech expert who literally wrote the book on dimensional connectivity, were already tracking them while all this was going on. Now, in our final scene, we see Rick Flag Sr. meets the returning group, and Chris, he immediately throws himself under the bus to protect his friends, telling Flag that the others came to the other world to steal the technology back and to capture him. As our final scene shows Chris, now arrested, being taken away by the Argus agents. What's going on, Peacemakers, and welcome back to my channel. Man, it's been a bumpy ride, to say the least, of a season to get to this point, and we're here to break it down. We're talking about Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 8, titled Full Nelson. Yeah, this was an episode of television. A bunch of music videos, some things that just didn't seem to add up, and yeah, we're going to unpack it all in this finale, focusing on the inevitable kiss, the horrors behind the doors, and the chilling reveal of Planet Salvation. Let's break this finale down, and hopefully we can have some good things to say about it. Full spoilers ahead. Now, we open this finale with the flashback that we've been waiting for, and it's 1 month ago, and that's focusing on Chris and Harcourt, who are out at the Big Belly Burger, loose and having fun and laughing, and definitely fueling up with some liquid courage. Now, Chris spots a flyer for the Nelson's Band cruise, confirming that this is the infamous boat night that we've been talking about since episode 1 of this season. Now, this happens later in the episode, but since we're here, let's just talk about it. It finally happened. We see what happened between Harcourt and Chris as Harcourt lets her guard down entirely. It's vulnerable, it's real, and they finally sealed the deal with a kiss. But we know Harcourt, she doesn't have emotions, as she says, as she naturally leaves the situation. Now, cutting back to present day, and we see that Chris is completely derailed after what happened in last week's episode. As we see him in his cell, convinced that he's cursed, and as he calls himself the Angel of Death, as he refuses to see any visitors. Now, if there is something positive to say about this finale that ties into the overarching theme of the season, and that's redemption in an eternal fight, but external forces are always ready to exploit your weakness. Now, while Chris is spiraling in his cell, we see Rick Flag executing a master plan. Now, in this plan, we head back into the quantum unfolding chamber where Flag has sent the Argus team, including Harcourt, on a mission that they don't understand. We see Flag telling Sydney that everything they worked for is finally coming to fruition. And with the return of Otis, who we saw in Superman, we get a glimpse into why. As Rick Flag is actually looking and taking notes from Lex Luthor. Now the question is, what are they hunting for? It's definitely not freedom, as they're hunting for the ultimate cage. Now within the folding chamber, the team finally finds door 22. Now after not having any luck with opening up any of the other doors, they do manage to open up this door, and for a glorious second, it looks pretty beautiful. It looks like a candy land. Peaceful and nice, and then the little nightmares attack. Now, for my comic book fans out there, this whole segment comes from the 5th dimension that inhabits imps. Now, Harcourt, being the beast that she is, she survives the ambush, but poor Klein gets his face eaten by the tiny terrors and dies. Now, the cost of this mission seems to be astronomical, but Rick Flag Sr. doesn't really care. I'm going to say it now since we're on the topic. The whole Rick Flag Sr. becoming essentially just like a villain at this point is completely unearned. If you all have been watching the birth of the DC universe, which goes back to December with Creature Commandos, that version of Rick Flag into Superman and now where we see Rick Flag Sr. at now makes no sense at all. How this man went from working side by side with metahumans to save the world to now wanting to imprison metahumans, which we'll talk about here in a second, again, to me, just seems short-sighted and seems to came out of left field, and I'll be honest, I hate it. But as I digress, we'll save more of my thoughts for later. We are back at the house where John and Harcourt finally talk, realizing they are utterly in the dark about Rick Flag's true motives. Now, Harcourt, against her character arc so far this season, she doesn't really seem to be that concerned about the people that's dying in these missions in the chamber. She thinks that whatever Flag is doing is for the betterment of the people. But John corrects her and lets her know that whatever flag and Lex Luthor is building that is not for the betterment of the people, it's probably something evil. Meanwhile, we get a brief but an important character moment that wasn't built properly this season. As we see Ads finally breaks up with her wife, again to me it wasn't built up at all because the last time we saw her wife was maybe 7 episodes ago and she hasn't mentioned her since, but all of a sudden we're supposed to care about this breakup, which again didn't mean anything to me, but it does clear the decks for the future of this character to focus on more things and maybe give Adebayo more to do than just giving her a wife and dogs and wanting to have a security team and all that. It was just terribly written. If you all have been following my breakdowns, I'm a big Adebayo fan, and boy, you talk about a waste of a character. Absolutely no mention of her mother, Amanda Waller. Absolutely no character growth whatsoever. Just terribly written this season. Now comes the big reveal, and that's Rick Flagg's massive celebration with all these people dying around him again. This is just so embarrassing the way this has been written and how things are just rushed. We see Rick Flag has his catalog of the different multiverses that we encounter in this episode. We get a wormhole, which looks similar to the one we saw in Superman. We have a dimension with burning skulls. And then this is kind of cool, I'm not going to lie, because I'm a DC fan. We get the deceased planet, which is filled with zombies from the comics. It's just a gold mine of data for Rick Flag Sr. so far. But the key finding that Rick Flag Sr. has been looking for is the reveal of Planet Salvation. Now, the whole plan is Rick Flag Sr. is working primarily off a proposal conceived by Lex Luthor, and it is creating the ultimate intergalactic prison. A place where dangerous and literally all metahumans are dumped with no hope of return. As we see Rick Flag Sr. pitching this to the Secretary of State, who seems to be on board with this idea. Again, how we go from Superman to Peacemaker, where the Secretary of State and Rick Flag seem to be kind of sympathizing with metahumans, especially Superman for saving the world from Lex Luthor, who they're now working with, and they like to work with his plan. Yeah, the writing is just all over the place. Now, for those that aren't too familiar with Planet Salvation from the comics, it was actually based on a pitch from George R.R. Martin, and it follows a world where various supervillains are captured by the Suicide Squad and imprisoned on a distant planet. The story features the villains splitting into alliances and either attempting to escape the planet or choosing to rule over it. Now, at the time of this recording, I've seen some things that James Gunn has said about Planet Salvation, and it seems to be important to the future of the DC Universe. Most likely, we'll see a plot line of this happening in Man of Tomorrow. And I'm sure the people that love this finale and love this season will probably hold on to the fact that, oh man, this is setting up the future. But as I'll talk about later, I'm more concerned about the present and not worried about the future. And this episode seems so more concerned about the future of the DCU than actually having a satisfying conclusion to this season of television. Now, don't get me wrong, thematically, I understand the expression that the show is trying to focus on here, and that's the theme of control. Now, whether that be Rick Flag Sr. or Lex Luthor, they're not trying to work side by side with metahumans, even though both characters have worked with metahumans, whether it be Lex Luthor working with the engineer or working with Ultraman, or you have Rick Flag Sr., who, like I said, work with a team of metahumans. They don't want to work beside them. They now just want to get rid of them entirely, which again, I understand the theme of that, but it just doesn't feel earned, especially from the perspective of Rick Flag Sr. But back to the episode, Bardot having lost some agents, and as she calls them friends, like I didn't know she had any friends in Argus. She seemed to hate working there, but she realizes this plan is monstrous, which leads her to calling Harcourt. And in this, we do get an unlikely but kind of a fun alliance. We see Ads and Harcourt bringing in Bardot as they work together to try to do something for good. But first, they need Chris. Now we watch as Adrian steps up, being talked to by Adebayo to using the blood money, or as he calls it, the curse money, for something good, and that's to bail Chris out. Now they end up bailing Chris out, but he still heads home, only immediately to pack up to leave town, as we watch the 11th Street kids intercept him at his hotel. Now, the best part of this episode is the emotional centerpiece of the episode. As Adrian tackles Chris to stop him from running, we have ads leading to this genuine heart-to-heart moment with all the 11th Street kids trying to talk Chris to not leave. As we watch, everyone shares what Chris means to them, and it is a heartfelt moment, but it just didn't work for me because we spent the majority of this season with the team being split apart. Now, Chris finally gets the answer he needed from Harcourt, and that's yes, the kiss meant something to her. So Let's talk about this. So we just saw a scene of Adebayo, we saw Adrian, John, even Harcourt, pouring their hearts out, letting them know how much they love Chris, and putting on Harcourt aside for a second, but just ads, pouring their heart out. Like, no one in this world loves me, but you love me. Yes, you're a goofball, but you love me, and I love you for loving me. That's sweet. But after Chris hears that, he still was willing to stay back. It wasn't until Harcourt said, yeah, your kiss meant something, that he was all happy and celebrating. So the man that's been waiting to have love his whole life, he's been rejected by his dad, he lost his brother in both universes, but now he has people telling them that they love him, that he means something, but that doesn't mean anything to him, and he only cares about Harcourt. He's simping over Harcourt. We've been building this whole season of him wanting people to love him, and once he gets that, he said, I don't want that, I just want you to love me, Harcourt. He gets that, and it just feels like a slap in the face from a character perspective. Oh boy, if you guys can't tell, I was not a fan of this finale, but again, we'll save that towards the end.
Peacemaker. What a joke.
Now, after Harcourt tells Chris what she did, Chris breaks free of his own mental prison. He's finally back. Now, we watched them celebrate in slow motion, founding a new security service with the whole crew, which actually includes Bardot, Flurry, Judo Master, all coming together with 11th Street kids, as this new service will be going under the name of Checkmate. Now, obviously, for those that don't know, Checkmate is a nod to the comics, but now it's founded on this genuine friendship and the moral alignment rather than the cloudy government operations from Amanda Waller. As we get the classic triumphant slow motion walk, the music swells and you think they've won. But we see this happiness only lasts about 5 seconds. As Chris returns to his hotel room, ready to start his new life with his new team, we see he gets taken. And he gets taken by no other than Rick Flag Sr. Looking at Chris dead in the eyes and tells him this is for his son Junior, as Chris will now serve as a test dummy for this new planet. As Chris is thrown into Salvation Planet. He's left alone in this harsh new world, hearing the terrifying roars and clicks of unseen creatures, being used as a literal guinea pig to assure the baseline human can survive on this planet before they start shipping the worst metahumans there. This finale leaves Chris completely isolated, stripped of his newfound family and redemption, a lone peacemaker facing a planet built for total containment. So, what did I think about this finale? Well, I'll be 100% honest with you. If you couldn't tell to this point in the video, I didn't like it. Why didn't I like it? Well, to me, it felt like a 56-minute long episode of television filled with random music songs by James Gunn and his favorite band, intercut with these over-dramatic, melodramatic scenes. And it seemed to be more focused on setting up the future of the DCU than paying attention to the present of this very underwhelming, very mediocre season of Peacemaker. I know a lot of you all love this new season, and I'm happy that you all did, but I'm seeing people saying this is better than season 1. This is the best thing that DC has put out. Like, I'm sorry, did you all not watch The Penguin that just came out in December that's 10 times better than this? Hell, I won't even talk about the Penguin. I'll talk about Peacemaker season 1. If you think that Peacemaker season 2 is better than season 1, we're going to have to agree to disagree, because Peacemaker season 2 was absolutely inconsistent, completely uneven, and honestly, felt like a waste of time. Now, sure, as you all, if you've been following my breakdowns, there have been some good moments in a cut with some of these episodes. There's been good episodes, but collectively speaking, this was such an inconsistent, sloppy season of television. Whether it was, and listen, I'm a James Gunn fan. I like James Gunn, but this to me is my biggest fear of the DC universe moving forward. That is the simple thing of no one being able to tell James Gunn no. No, James Gunn, we shouldn't spend time on eagerly having this subplot with this fake person played by one of your best friends, or rather for spending time with Vigilante or Adebayo building actual characters. No, let's just have a gag about bird blindness. No, James Gunn, let's have Peacemaker go to this planet called Earth X filled with Nazis and build it up to just absolutely nothing. And oh yeah, we're going to have Keith end on a cliffhanger, him being this potential villain, but we're not going to address that at all. And oh yeah, like I said, the blacks that are left on the planet, all the minorities on Planet X, oh, don't worry about them, they'll be fine. Oh, James Gunn, don't tell the media that the reason you didn't give episodes 6, 7, and 8 is because there's these big, and I quote, James Gunn said this, big cameos, big DC characters that you all are going to be so excited to see. No one told James Gunn to say, don't say that. Just let the show speak for itself besides overhyping people up. Look, man, I don't want to spend more time on this finale. I'm still a fan of these characters. I thought, if I were to speak positively about this finale and this season in general, even though I didn't feel the conclusion was earned, I did like seeing the character journey we saw Peacemaker on, trying to find love, whether it was in another dimension filled with Nazis. That was interesting. Looking at Harcourt, a character that really didn't have that much going on in season 1. She was a badass, don't get me wrong. She was a cool character, but didn't have a character arc. She got her arc in this season. She was finally vulnerable. I'm assuming that her and Chris are now a thing, even though it wasn't explicitly said. You can just kind of read the tea leaves and kind of get that understanding that they're now a thing. But her storyline really worked for me. Outside of that, Adebayo had nothing to do. Vigilante's just a walking joke. I love Vigilante, but this is like James Gunn's version of Deadpool. John Economos had some moments. Eagly, we all love Eagly, but I mean, it's Eagly at the end of the day. And then all the new supporting characters, Bardo, Langston, Rick Flag Sr., those characters just to me were just nothing burgers. And again, don't even get me started. You guys heard me talk about Rick Flag Sr. this season. Absolutely all over the place. Again, you look at Creature Commandos, you look at Superman, and then you look at what we got in this season of Rick Flag Sr., it doesn't add up. So, with all that said, I would say this was a failure of a finale of television, and as of right now, James Gunn hasn't confirmed there's going to be a season 3, so we're led to believe this is the last time we're going to see Peacemaker in the context of a TV show. Clearly, we're going to see Peacemaker in Man of Tomorrow in some other capacity, and these other characters will probably be in Man of Tomorrow, but as of right now, this is the season/series finale of Peacemaker, and if that's the case, what a disappointment. But that is just my thoughts on this season and this finale. But I want to know yours in the comments below. Hey, if you loved it, I am happy for you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. If I were to look at this as just like a sitcom television show that doesn't need to be taken seriously, then yeah, it's a fun show. But in the context of where it came from season 1 into this season, it was just, you can tell James Gunn was writing this while writing Superman. He has too much on his plate, and I think this show suffered from that, me personally. But again, let me get off my soapbox and toss it back to you all. What did you think about the finale? What did you think about the season? What worked? What didn't work? What are your theories? What do you hope to see in the future? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. If you all appreciated my breakdown, please do me a favor, hit the like button, but also in doing so, hit the hype button on YouTube. Please consider sharing this video, but more importantly, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, consider subscribing to my podcast. Leave me some comments about what you thought of the season finale. What did you think about the season overall? And leaving me a review, I would really appreciate it. Man, guys, I'm sorry that I'm not enthusiastic about this finale. I'm really disappointed, but I'm still hopeful for the future of the DC universe. I am really excited for Supergirl. I cannot wait for Lanterns. If I'm being honest with you all, I am so glad to be out of the James Gunn's world of Creature Commandos, Superman, which things I enjoyed, going to Peacemaker. I'm just so glad to have this universe in someone else's hands. So thank you all for watching or listening. Hope you all stay safe, and I will catch you all on the next breakdown.